to make it worse. Let's see here. So that's worse. I said, let's see some curls at the front, not all of the curls. Not all the whole.
You ask him to leave some curls.
Yeah, he's like.
You want to leave me some curls?
No, there's any. Please don't attempt it on a live video. Don't.
You want to leave me some curls?
I said, let's see some curls at the front, not all of the curls. Not all the whole.
How are you getting on, lads? Few regular names popping into the comments.
Team Richie snatching
131.
130. Pretty juicy 131.
Yeah, it is a juicy 131, isn't it?
It's a juicy 131.
See that he is in some shape.
He's in great shape.
He is in phenomenal nick.
Respect for
when
Nike 2s.
When a 5-time CrossFit Games champion says he wants to look like you, then you know you're in good shape.
Yeah, respect for wearing your Nike 2s as well. Evening from Aussie land, morning from the west coast of the States. Oh, I need to record this.
It's all set up. Right, keep popping up the questions there. We're just waiting for now.
Oh, shit. You can't have too many.
Just before we get started as well, there's no point asking us injury questions. Not saying there's an injury question there, but we won't really be answering injury questions.
And it's mad that you come to us for injury questions.
Yeah.
Because we never talk about injury questions unless it's about our own thing. It's a great top, isn't it?
Yeah, Under Armour make great long sleeve tops.
Make good t-shirts as well.
Any recommendations on fixing butt wink in a low bar squat? I have recommendations. Do you have a recommendation?
So usually the low bar squat, you will probably need to be thinking about kind of spreading your knees a little bit wider, as in like driving them out to the side. It's probably one of the better ways of controlling room for your hip. So normally what happens in a high bar squat, when you have a lot of forward knee travel, or you need a lot of forward knee travel, what often happens is people don't have the adequate range of motion, or they're standing too close in their squat stance, and so then their lower back doesn't have the required stability or flexibility, and it kind of compensates for the butt wink. So what you can kind of do then with the high bar squat is make your foot a little bit wider, your foot stance, your squatting stance a little bit wider, give your hips a bit more room, and have a little bit more coordination with your hips and knees. But obviously in the low bar, you can't really go with too much more forward knee travel. So usually the low bar, what you need to do is kind of learn to kind of screw your kind of hips, open them up a little bit, and then drive your knees out to the side. So in their squat stance, so then their lower back doesn't have the required stability or flexibility.
You're very easily distracted.
I'm easily distracted. I'm easily distracted.
Yeah.
Am I?
Yeah.
Get on with the question.
You were answering. The other, to be honest, I think the biggest way people...
You're distracted, are you?
I think the biggest way people fuck up, or they have a butt wink for a low bar squat, is they have a terrible position when they stand up at the top. So they have the bar like really low down. They tend to be like leant over forward before they even start. And then they're seeking this like feeling of tightness in their lower back. And they end up having an extended lower back instead of having a neutral lower back. So then obviously if I'm squatting with an extended lower back, at some point that's going to come into play as being a weaker point in my setup. And it's just, you're going to have butt wink every single time. So I'd say start looking at the actual position you're starting the squat with. Make sure you're upright and you're not like leant over like this, barely able to hold it. A lot of like particularly medium or moderately good low bar squatters, they start squats like this and then sit down and stand up like you start a squat like this.
You do see sometimes about a lot of low bar people at the moment will squat like toes forwards because they'll feel like a more quadsy movement, which is ironic because you're trying to do a low bar squat. But what you should probably be doing is looking for like a toes out position. So we're not looking like duck feet, but we're looking like kind of a 45-degree angle, like of your mid toe or whatever, of your little pointy toe if you point to people with your feet. So slightly angled out and give your hips a bit more room, and it will kind of like open up your hips a little bit more, get a bit more glute med, a bit of hip action going a little bit better to reduce the butt wink. You shouldn't really see that much butt wink in low bar squats, so there's something fundamentally wrong. Usually it's probably not a small thing. So QL injury, answer that. Top of the morning from USA. Hello, hey.
The skating reptile wants to know: did we see the 81 kilo lifter attempt 200 kilo clean and jerk? I didn't.
I did. Is he Thai? I thought he was Indonesian. So he's the guy that pauses at the hip, really weird.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he cleaned this, but he didn't jerk it. But that's him going to attempt it. I think he's a junior.
Okay.
Chris Stance says, I have the exact body composition I want. Given I don't want to build any muscle, weird, how should I approach squatting and improving numbers? So we talked about this a few weeks ago, and we talked about, and we went into pretty in depth in this, and how neurological, lighter powerlifters, Chris, I assume you're a powerlifter, overplay the role of getting better at the same body weight. And
it's such a limiting factor.
It's a hugely limiting factor. So, for example, if we look at one of the best kind of longitudinal studies on elite athletes in relation to, for example, strength sports. So, Soviets were some of the best and most comprehensive sports scientists. Maybe not the most morally righteous sports scientists ever, but they had decades of sports science, right? And they had loads of young athletes, and they followed them through, and they purposely channeled certain athletes through one factor or another, and they followed their athletics athletes, they followed their weightlifters. And one of the main things they say and they found with their strength training athletes, so with their weightlifters, was that cutting body weight or not gaining body weight for weightlifters was one of the limiting factors and could shorten the lifter's career or stunt it prematurely if you didn't gain enough body weight. So we talked about this before. So there's a couple of ways you get stronger. So there's it's kind of like neurological efficiency, motor unit firing, like the sequences of those, how fast they fire. There's things like antagonist coactivation. We've been all over these loads of times before, right? But also one of the ways you get stronger is by gaining hypertrophy. Now, all of these other ones overplay themselves very, very soon into your training. So after 2 or 3 years of training, if you've diligent training, you've good genetics, your speed isn't going to increase that much. Your antagonist coactivation reduces with time over just experience and strength training as your body gets used to it. Your coordination gets better. You can improve these, but these will be very, very small improvements in strength. So we're talking like 5% less, maybe total between all of those, maybe a little bit more. If you're using drugs, for example, this would change the game. You could change your kind of neurological factors. You could change those and exponentially increase those. But Chris, assuming you're not on drugs, the only factor of those two that I've mentioned there is gaining body weight. So what you have to do is you need to gain some body weight. You need to gain some muscle mass. You need to gain some muscle tissue to improve if you've got to a stage where you have milked all the gains from your current body weight and current body composition. Otherwise, the gains will come very, very slowly, and you'll end up in a position where you just won't be progressing.
To be honest, I've only ever come across one of these situations ever where the person is genuinely like, more muscle will be bad, and that's in the case of like somebody who's like a male model and he won't get any more work if he's bigger and like if his shoulders are just that much bigger. But you really have to play up then, like you're not going to want heavier squats, you're not going to want heavier deadlifts. That's just something you're kind of telling yourself you want. If you're in the first case Owen talked about, and I know we did talk about this a few weeks ago, if you're in the first case Owen talked about where you're like, oh no, I'm 75 kilos now and I want to keep pushing this because I want to get the triple body weight or 3.5 times body weight, it's just not, it's not long term a good thing. You're much better off looking at actual numbers on the bar, actual weights lifted in competition or in wherever, and let that be the factor you're chasing. Don't be the double body weight or 2.5 times body weight or anything like that.
Now look, if you're just a recreational strength athlete and competing is your priority, and getting stronger, squatting numbers, whatever, is a minor priority, you can accept slower progress, but it'll be much, much slower. But be honest with yourself and set the goals you want and then approach them in a way that will maximize those goals as opposed to, not really improving anything. So I hope that answers your question, Chris.
Scott Kerr wants to know, why is it that some people are able to rep out 170 by 8 like nothing on the squat but struggle to hit 100? Then the likes of me can do 170 by 5 but I can do 200. So this is, and he asked below, is it a fast or slow twitch thing? It's not. Realistically, in lifting of weights, it's all fast twitch fibers you use. Powerlifters use the same fibers weightlifters do. Their proportions might be slightly different, but very, very, very minorly, right? Squatting and snatches do use the same fiber types. They're just being activated a small bit better or a small bit faster in the case of the snatch. The people who are really good at doing high rep stuff are really good at doing high rep stuff because they've a certain capacity or they have a certain habit built up over time of being very, very good at this. Gerf classically would have been phenomenally good at sets of 10s and sets of 8s. It's just something he has really good muscular capacity. He enjoys, for some fucking weird reason, doing high rep squats, and he used to love doing them in training.
Yeah.
And when he do them in training, he found them to be really productive.
For high rep squats.
For high rep squats. And that's it. Like, so that's
not
why.
Not my 1RM or my lifting.
Yeah, but you spent a lot of time with high rep squats.
I just really enjoy doing them.
Yeah. So that's why, like, it's people who are good at high rep squats do too many high rep squats. People who are really good at singles, like 170 by 5 and you can back squat 200, you're not a million miles away from being all right there. You probably want to do 170 by 8 realistically, to do 200, like, but you just need to find the middle of the road. You never want to be too good at either of those. You don't want to be not able to hit. You don't want to be like hitting 160 for 5 and being able to squat 200 for a single. Like, that's not ideal because you won't have the necessary capacity for long-term training adaptation or continued training over the course of numbers of months. Like, you need that base and that foundation. But the other way around as well, like, you don't want to be the person who's doing 180 for 8 and then missing 200 for a single.
So usually what happens with this, right, is what we always see is people will just not be used to practicing heavier singles. So usually it's a skill thing, so people just won't end up actually doing more singles or practicing singles, so they won't periodize their training. What we'll often see is people will do something, they'll like repeat workouts. So they'll be a big fan of repeating 5x5 or like 5x3, and they'll repeat this ad nauseum for months on end. And they'll get better at the 5x5 or the 6x8 or whatever the fuck they're doing, you know. But at no point do they periodize through different sets and reps and eventually slowly work in the capacity to do heavy singles. And so at no point do they ever go from being very good at higher reps, then transferring this over to moderate reps, then transfer this over to moderate to low reps, and then transferring this into singles. They literally just get very good at those reps forever, and then due to getting better at those reps, the certain percentages, their 1RM goes up a little bit. But if they periodize their training a little bit more aggressively and productively, they'd see that their 1RM would go up a lot more than that. You know, so very often it's a thing where it's just poor programming and not so much an individual skill. Now, of course, some people are better or worse, but it's not as much as you think. Most people are very, very similar, unless they spend unless, of course, as we're talking about, they spend a shitload of time doing that kind of training. You know, unless they spend a shitload of time focusing on the wrong part of a certain training. I've lost the ability to do very heavy high reps. Well, it's still there under the surface, but I actively don't do them that much in training. I've only once this year, I've only done sets of 10s, and it's still following through for me now. It's still done what I needed to do. I did 10s and 8s for a couple of weeks. But I've actively stayed away from higher rep sets because it was a skill I was too good at for a while, and it doesn't productively help. At one stage, if I put in, I think it was 220 for, I think I did 220 for 15 reps. Or 14 reps maybe. If you put that into 1RM calculator, it said my max is like 315 kilos. Like I did 200 for 19. I would have done 20, but if it's counted wrong.
Gerf didn't count and asked me to start counting halfway through.
I'm sorry, no. Every reasonable person will understand you can't possibly count on me tomorrow.
But then you just simply ask before you start. I was out scratching my arse or something.
I definitely told you I'm going to need you to count this.
You didn't? You can hear it in the video.
Just weren't paying attention as usual.
Never pay attention. Okay, just because I've scrolled down through this, stop asking injury questions. We won't answer them, even if we know the answers. We won't give them to you. I do. So somebody asked. I'm just going to find the question.
So it's Eric Farket.
What is Farket?
Eric Farket. What is ideal extension in the clean?
I'm going to show you what ideal extension in the clean, because one of my one-to-ones yesterday was asking this question.
I'm going to give some nuance. For no reason, but it's good for people to hear, even though it's not useful for us asking.
Can everyone see this? This is ideal extension in the clean. This is Gabriel Sincrain. I think this is 200 kilos or 205. The clean, you can have a small bit of deviation back here.
215, yeah.
Oh, yeah. You can have a small but more deviation backwards, But the biggest issue people have with their clean is overextending and their shoulders hanging out back here. Let's draw some lines. Usually you see this kind of swinging knees way forward and then the bar loops out and around.
That's not showing up.
Can you see the thing though?
It's the thing, but not the lines. Oh, now it's showing up.
But ideally what you want is a position very similar to Gabe here. So this is the ideal position. Then the bar will come up much more vertically.
No, the lines aren't coming up.
Aren't they?
No, it's
there,
right.
yeah.
Oh, it's
just delayed. So that's the ideal, and Gerf is going to provide some nuance now.
So basically, most of the time, right, people overextend in the clean or overpull the bar essentially. And the main thing with the clean is we're just looking for the minimum possible bar height that we can get under, you know. And for some people, how this will look kind of different is some people's full extension will only get them to a certain bar height. Other people, like Plez and I, would be an extreme example, or the Ukrainians teach it. Their maximum extension is a very, very short extension, but it gets them to that bar height. So it all kind of depends on you as a lifter. What you need to do is look at a very easy way of watching this, right? Is if you are the kind of lifter who, and you can kind of see is there, you have lifters who like catch a bar literally up here. So what are we, like fucking 6 feet above parallel, and then they'll ride the barbell down. Or you'll see lifters who are catching the barbell just above parallel and squatting down, you know. So watch your videos. If there's a huge time from when you're, say if you imagine this is your ass or your hip and this is your knee, if there's a lot of travel from when the bar lands in your chest and your knee goes all the way down to your ass, and that means you are catching it very high and probably overpulling and overextending. Whereas if you're somewhere like parallel, and then there's a little drop to the bottom of the squat up your standing, then you're probably okay with how you're extending. But if the bar looks slow or you look slow, then there's probably an issue.
Okay. Jimmy Rustler says, after watching Zach's seminar, I started periodized training. Is a 4-week mesocycle optimal, or are longer periods of loading, supercompensation, performance better? The most used term on this channel is it depends. For if you're an Olympic weightlifter, to be honest, I don't think 4 weeks is enough. We don't really use 4 weeks a lot of the time. That means you're 3 weeks on and 1 week of deload, and that's not what most of the kind of science would say either. But mesocycles as a thing, most of the time in sport, you will see like a mesocycle being around 4 weeks. To be honest, I prefer 6 or 8 weeks, and it allows for a small bit better progression.
So typically, what we'll have is kind of like 4-week microcycles as part of fit set of like that kind of 8-week block, or maybe sometimes even kind of 12 weeks, depending on what the athlete is. It usually works out being around kind of 10 weeks when they need a deload. So we'll have like 2 distinct kind of microcycles, so 4-week sections, and they'll be mostly the same exercise selection, but with varying load and varying sets and reps, but slowly heading towards the end of that kind of periodized block, so that bigger 10-12 week block, depending on what happens. For women, female lifters typically can go for like 6 weeks microcycles, so 6 week blocks. So we're looking at like in this bit grander scheme of like a 12-week thing. So they can push for longer, and not only can they push for longer, oftentimes you need to push for longer to get more results for female lifters or female, particularly female lifters. Other sports might be a little different, but for weightlifting, it's a little bit longer for female athletes. But for men, typically 4-week microcycles, but it's usually like an 8-week peaking to maybe 10 weeks, depending on how people are going.
Okay, Chris Dance says, considerations for optimizing agility. Okay, so for parkour, it appears though Chris Dance is a parkour athlete. Yes. That's why he doesn't want to gain any more muscle. Gaining a bit more muscle won't have a huge effect. Definitely don't put on like 3 or 5 kilos, but you can have a small, like 1 kilo of muscle tissue, 2.2 pounds.
A quarter of a kilo
is going to massively affect the ability to do squats.
Yeah. People think about, when we watch things like that testosterone, Turkmenistan thing.
Yeah. 20 pounds gain of muscle.
Lean mass. So people only see the visual changes, but 250 grams of lean tissue, tissue, is phenomenal. Contractile tissue makes a huge difference to your training. Like actual contractile tissue, like literally half a kilo is phenomenal, and it's super fucking effective at what it does. So Don't think, geez, I got to put on 10 kilos of lean mass or else I'm not going to see anything.
Yeah,
Like,
you'll notice the difference.
Yeah, literally, if you got half a good kilo, you'd be seeing great improvement especially as a leaner athlete as well. You'll notice an improvement.
But to your original question, or to your actual question, tips for improving agility for something like parkour. This is a bit of a more complicated one, right? So parkour obviously is a fairly unique sport. It's jumping and landing a lot of the time, but you also have some sort of upper body component with a lot of the movements. Agility in sports would mostly be defined as like the ability to rapidly change direction. So that change in direction is obviously you have to be able to take a huge amount of force. So if you're jumping up off a wall, you have to be able to absorb force really well. And then you have to be able to store some of that absorbed force in a muscle tendon unit. And then you have to contract and jump away, whether that's bounding on, whether that's hopping over a small wall and landing again. So the first thing for improving that would be having really, really good rigidity within the joint and really good integrity within the joint. Obviously, you're the opposite of a sprinter or a field athlete where rigidity within the joint will be making that ankle as inflexible as possible, making that Achilles tendon as rigid as possible. In your case, because you'll have to have increased range of motion for some of the landings, for some of the different moves, that's not the ideal scenario. But what I would say is being very, very strong would really help.
Keep going there. I might make this a clip of YouTube, so there's other things I want to talk about.
Right. The next thing on from that is when you look at agility as well, you have to have really good like acceleration and power output. So if you're going to rapidly change direction, you not only have to stop the direction you're going, but you have to take off again in an opposite direction or in a slightly altered direction. So in the first piece where we were talking about like having the integrity of the joint being really strong, making sure your ankles are very rigid, your knees are very rigid, and you're able to absorb force. The next thing on from that would obviously be having like a high power output. And you're talking about a high power output in a split second. So 1, 2, 3, 4 contractions in a row, less than 5 seconds apart. You're talking about like just an ATP energy system or just a creatine phosphate energy system, depending on how big the next one is. But that's what I would say. Start with your joint integrity, joint rigidity. Once you've got that nailed down where you can jump and land and absorb all that force, then look at your power output stuff. And that will really help your overall agility.
Something you could look into, Chris, as well, is doing use of cluster sets. For example, sets of 2 in the power clean, or maybe like sets of 2 in the front squat or back squat. So the cluster stuff, usually we would never really use it for anything. We'd never really put it anywhere. But for something like this, if you're looking for kind of agility work, the cluster set does seem to work well for like velocity-based stuff, and there's a lot of newer research on it. And some of it's kind of interesting. It's very, very niche, as with all research and, kind of niche programming research tends to be. But for this particular case, it'd be interesting to see. So I'd like to see maybe if you do Olympic lifts, it's like power cleans would be great. But if you did stuff like even set to 2 in the back squat, so like set to 2, like you go every 30 seconds, for example. But very importantly, with these cluster sets, you're using a weight that you can move quite fast. So something probably like between like 50 to 70% of your max back squat, for example. So like it moves very, very fast. Make sure you're doing these days on a day when you're fresh as well. Even more kind of nuanced than that, you could definitely look into getting something like a velocity meter. So there's some very good ones. They're very, very expensive in relation to what they are and how often you use in your training. But if you wanted to, you could get them. There's like a VMAX one or something. I think it's called VMAX, where you could just look at the velocity of your barbell and just kind of, you could start playing around with that kind of stuff as well. If you are, for example, if you might, I don't know if you do or not, Chris, but if you make your living from parkour, it could be something you could look into and just start taking recordings of your bar speeds and sets and reps and kind of record that as well and see, there could be days where you're like, the day before I did front squats and the bar speed was like 1 meter per second and I was really, really sharp on my jumps the day after. Or it could be like, fuck, I was doing deadlifts and the bar speed was like 0.2 meters per second and my jumps really shit the day after, So you might start noticing...
It's another reference point.
Yeah, random little variables and kind of nuances like that. So that might be something also to look into.
Varden asks, can I apply for one-to-one coaching? Yeah, you definitely can. You just have to email us seekyourstrength@gmail.com. on the point of one-to-one coaching, you're talking about like being lucky to get one in before the end of the month now. So just if you are interested, just email us as soon as possible, because it's very, very close to being full, or constantly running at kind of full. So just if you are interested, seekastrength@gmail.com, and we'll book you guys on a call, and we'll just have a chat and see what the best way forward is. Okay, Abdullah Aid says, so he's a soccer player just starting the Road to Anywhere squat program. In week 4, should I incorporate hamstring work like Romanian deadlifts? No. It's only 8 weeks. I'm not sure what stage of your soccer season you're at the moment, Abdullah. If you're close to us, you're probably not even in an in-season block, or not in a serious part of your season anyway. Don't just give this the 8 weeks, and then go back to your hamstring work afterwards. If you were to do some hamstring work, do it after day 2 and do hamstring Nordics, and then do some static glute bridge hold where your feet are a bit further out in front, so your hamstrings are more taxed. But I would advise against it, would be the best thing to say.
Nick Pole says, my dip and drive when the jerk pulls me forward in heavier weights and it feels like it sinks me down. Any advice on making it stronger?
Make you stronger.
So there's probably 2 things you could do. So one is a warm-up where you do a dip and drive in front of the wall just with the empty barbell, and you practice just with keeping your knees from touching the wall, or as you're driving up, you make sure you're not falling forward into that wall, The second thing you can do then in terms of training is you can do pause, dip and drive jerks. Don't do these too often, but do them frequently enough, maybe once a week, and go reasonably heavy with them. And that'll allow you just to practice that position and pause where you want to be, and it'll give you time to kind of reassess where you are, give you time for your body to figure out where you want to be, and then you can drive straight up into it. So a little bit dip and drives in front of the wall, just a small amount, and then pause, dip and drives are usually quite good for this. But also then on top of that, probably just getting a bigger front squat will make a lot of difference. And really importantly, the best thing we all see from our amateur lifters and how they improve themselves an awful lot in their jerk is massively improving upper body strength. Now, not only pressing strength, so pressing strength obviously, but things like rows, core strength, lower back stuff massively improves people's pulling positions and their jerk positions or dip and drive in the split jerk. So drills, pause dips, stronger front squat, stronger upper body.
Can I have your gym music recommendations, please, lads? My music's getting a bit dry. You need to go onto Spotify, and there's a playlist called Milligrams and Kilograms. So MGS and KGS. I think it's one of those weird
ampersand
symbols. A phenomenal heavy metal playlist.
I need to badly update that for Fitz, actually.
Yeah, it's very good. And then, but that's only for like super special days. Most of the time I'm training, I don't listen to anything, and if I do listen to something, it's either Irish trad music or it's country and western.
I'm listening to a lot of Rise Against at the moment. So I've obviously liked Rise Against for a long time, but you go through phases of certain artists. Rise Against is something I am just really, really digging at the moment. Again, a bit of the Dead South, and I'm really Mumford & Sons have made a big comeback again last week. Just Whispers in the Dark, Babel, that whole album is just phenomenal for training. I said a lot of BBs those years ago, and they just still keep their zest,
Mumford & Sons are great.
Colin Goodman says, how frequently are you training rows to help your upper back? Basically every second day. So I'm doing more rows than I'm doing squatting. So that should tell you how often lots of other people should be doing rows and their squat variation. So every second day, different kind of rows, different kind of grips, just doing lots of sets and reps, because you just can't do too much upper back, especially for weightlifting and squatting as well. Damien Catello says, should I address my insufficient mobility in the snatch? Can hit below parallel but can't cover my calves with hands before starting the beginner weights program, or is that considered in the program itself? What do you think, Phil?
I think so. If you're able to hit below parallel with an overhead squat and you're able to do the movements, your best thing to do now is just start the program and start progressing. Then you can start like fighting fires as they come up, but you're already at the prerequisite of like being able to do the movements. If it was something where you're like not able to hold a bar overhead without having like your arms slightly bent, or you weren't able to squat below parallel, or you couldn't front rack a barbell, then I would say go and fix that first. But in this case, start at like there's a saying of like the best time to plant a tree on a sunny day is 30 years ago. The next best time is today. The sooner you start working on it, the better.
Callum Bud Brophy says, you're going to try and PR anything what you see when you see Gabriel. I'm
Snatch
training
and clean and jerk.
like a fucking cunt at the moment, so hopefully.
I'm definitely going to PR because I haven't trained in years.
Go to the next question there.
Right. Livestream 2 of asking for a 40-yard dash showdown.
Alright.
Come on, good. We're going to have a 40-yard dash showdown. We might do it in Romania.
I'll do it in Romania and Gabriel will smoke us probably.
Yeah.
His little fat ass running past.
Okay.
What do you have in mind when trying to make your own program?
I have an answer to this.
So, it's not often we say this, right? But this is what the coaches are for. You know, if you could just tell someone what you think about when you're programming, then you would eliminate decades of experience and knowledge and education and stuff, you know. So trying to just give general recommendations on what you should have in mind to program for yourself would be like, man, there's so many things. There's just, and not to give a logic answer on this, but there's just so many things that you need to consider when you're doing your own programming. I literally can't even think right now where to start. We need to take like half an hour to think about this, nearly.
And it would be even longer than that, because what I would have to consider is so different from what Owen would have to consider. Every single person on the screen in front of me here has to consider completely different things. The only in any way valuable answer we could give you today is a needs analysis. Like, you need to sit down for a week and think about, where have I gone well in training in the last few years? Where have I gone poorly? What have I adhered to well? What have I not adhered to well? What was the right amount of training for me at any point in the past? What made me recover well at any point in the past? What put me in good shape? What made me strongest? What made me fastest? All of these things have to be considered. So it's a heavy one. Like, that is, it's more than one video even though.
So I think that actually I have one thing definitely one thing that would apply to everyone right now program. If you're not used to writing a program, write down whatever you think it is, right? And then take away 20% of the frequency, 20% of the volume, and 20% of the intensity, 20% of the exercise selection. Take away most of what you've written down. You know that fashion thing? They're like, take one accessory when you leave the house.
Yeah.
You need to do the same thing, because people are like, okay, I'm going to do, you know, not ragging on everything now, but Ivan does, like, he's going to do pin squats, now he's going to do, you know, RDLs, and he's going to do quad extensions.
And he does both of them for a session each time. Like,
everyone does this. So when you write their first week of program, and you're like, I'm going to do split squats today, and I'm going to do dumbbell bench, and I'm going to do shoulder raises, and I'm going to do ab wheel rollouts, and I'm going to do single arm javelin presses, and I'm going to do velocity based barbell tracking, and you're just going to do everything, you know. So just whatever you write down, take away most of it, and then look at it, and that's start with the lowest possible amount of work that you could possibly do in the gym that will still be somewhat effective, and then go from there.
Daniel, how do you know how to fix a sore bum hole? We can't emphasize enough how much we are not going to talk about injury questions, no matter how you sustain the injury, Daniel. Eugene says, Squat plugs. A lot of NFL athletes are against the vaccine. I have a wild theory that it could have complications with their peds. What are your thoughts on this? Other guys,
no, you can't answer. There's no way we're answering this. There's no way we're talking about this, Eugene. There's no way. Absolutely. No, you're going to say something incredibly inflammatory.
I'm going to say something offensive.
Don't say anything. Do not say anything. Do not say anything.
Can I just say it?
Go on, say it.
Talking like NFL athletes because they're phenomenal at playing American football. Most of them are very, very not intelligent people who bang their heads into other people for a living, and I would not listen to anything they say about vaccines or anything like that. In terms of vaccines themselves, it's so unlikely that NFL players aren't on any more drugs than your standard bodybuilder who's in the gym out in the city, or in your gym where you go, or in another gym down the road. They're probably on less drugs than all those guys. There's absolutely no way that they'd leave like Joe Soap, who's out in the city doing bicep curls and taking however much test every day. There's no way that vaccine could have possibly been released if there was any risk or any elevated risk due to the fact that somebody was taking PEDs, that they'd have an influence. One thing I will say though is that NFL athletes fall into the same group as every other high-performing, highly paid athlete, where their body is the only way they make money. And they might have 5 years, they might have 10 years, they might have 15 years if they're lucky, where they can glean the most amount of money from their body. So for somebody like that, even if they're going to be sick for 2 days or they're going to be sick for a week afterwards, that is a gigantic risk. It's the same as a Formula 1 driver not wearing his seatbelt for one race. It's so drastically different from me not wearing my seatbelt for one drive to the shop. I would say it's incredibly unlikely, but we obviously can't speak indefinite. But that is something when you're dealing with athletes in general, they're going to be so suspicious of anything that goes anywhere near them that could possibly limit their ability to play their sport or do whatever activity they do, because it's their full-time job, and the job prospects once they get out of the NFL are not going to be very good.
Yeah, we don't want to say Max too many more times on YouTube.
Yeah, I was thinking that actually.
Gabriel just got tested. Do you reckon Wada going to come for Garth and or Clarence? So neither myself or Clarence are members of any federation, so they could no more test me than they could some random person on the street. And before I would give them any more white piss, like
they've taken liters at this point.
I don't know why Gabriel submitted to the test. I think he was probably a bit surprised. He was probably like, oh shit, what's going on? Now, whether Gabriel was or was not, or is not using any performance-enhancing drugs, I guarantee you we're going to see a positive drug test.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. If Gabriel had been drinking milk for the last 4 years, they'll pop him.
I guarantee he's going to test positive. And we heard from a little birdie that there was all but one super was tested at the Olympics. All but one. And a very reliable source. Because when someone told us initially, we were like, maybe. But then we heard where it came from. Yeah. All but one certain super was tested. One
super heavyweight who should definitely have been tested.
How convenient is that?
How convenient that he lifts more weights than anyone else who's ever been alive.
On to the next question. Yo, Miro Scott's Adele is still under. When I satchel my max, my back angle against the lower like a low bar.
Wait, did you miss it?
No, I didn't.
Do you like VTubers?
Who are they?
I have no idea.
2 seconds, let me check. I saw some.
Sorry for cutting across you.
Oh, this is a virtual YouTuber. Oh, this looks like weird cartoon shit.
Oh no. The anime shit is so weird.
Not for us. You picked the wrong.
It's not for us. There's loads of other weightlifters who are into that, but it ain't here.
I don't know what the fuck this is, to be honest.
Okay, Callum Bud Brophy. Question I cut you off on.
That's a great name. I don't understand the question. So when I sat near my max, my back angle begins to lower like a low bar squat. How do I enforce keeping correct back angle? Keep my knees forward actively.
Oh yeah. So he's talking about he gets pulled forward by the bar.
That's supposed to happen.
Yeah, this is a misnomer. Mm-hmm. People think about like big chest, keep your chest up, keep your knees forward. That's wrong. Heavyweights need your knees to go back and your shoulders to come in front of the bar. And to be honest, with the one-to-ones we coach, a lot of the struggle of coaching somebody for better snatch technique is getting them used to that shoulders forward, knees back position. I definitely find that anyway. That's one of the most difficult things to teach people to do is put their knees back and get their shoulders in front of the bar and stop trying to squat up the weight.
And it makes no sense because your pull is stronger than your squat. So it makes no sense that you would favour that.
Yeah.
Leo Balatin says, well, lads, if you want to get into weightlifting and you live in Dublin, which gym would you go to get the best explanation? Capital Strength for sure.
Yeah.
Tell Harry, Owen and Fit sent you, and you won't get any discounts, but just tell them anyway because Harry.
He might not allow you to come, like, but
actually, don't tell him that.
Do tell them we don't need to go though.
They're in Dolphin's Barn. Phenomenally well equipped gym.
Yeah, really nice.
Run like a tight ship.
Yeah, they have a robot Hoover, so never any additional chalk around the place.
They do have a robot Hoover.
But no, I would really recommend going there.
We got one of them in the shed, it'll probably get some weird venereal disease and die.
Okay. Are we going to see some cheeky training vlogs from your trip to Romania?
I fucking hope so.
Eric Oliveira, you're going to see more cheeky training vlogs.
Yeah.
My God.
Thanks for answering the question. No problem.
Okay, Christopher Roberts says, gents, is there a difference in bracing between the front squat and the back squat? I always suffer thoracic collapse.
Did you really read that?
But I knew it's spelled wrong, like.
Okay, but you know what he meant.
I knew what he meant, but I wasn't going to away with
let's
it.
cut to the chase, right, Christopher? It's not.
No, it's not.
It's bracing is the exact same with the back squat and the front squat. The problem here is your upper back is too weak. Your back is just too weak. Honestly, this is just cut to the chase. The single best answer for this is your upper body is too weak. This is why we're talking about people need to do more rows than they're doing squatting. 2 to 1 frequency of rowing to squats, I'd say. So more rows. More rows, lots of
loads of rows.
Loads of rows.
Also presses.
Strict
presses, just become strong in the upper body.
The fucking muscles involved, the mechanics of the press are all still a lot of upper back as well. So more pressing, more rows. There's not a bracing issue here.
Okay, Merrick Cleote. I wonder, are you any relation to Chris Cleote, the Munster rugby player, who is a beast? Anyway, thoughts on speed work at 40% of max a la Westside method? No, that's so wrong. Speed work. Are we gonna? Okay. Power outputs are what people look for in the gym, right? So this, when you see rugby teams, they're pressing a bar really fast and they're measuring the speed of the bar, they're looking for a power output. So power is the rate at which work can be done. Power is expressed best between 60 and 80% of 1 rep max. 40%, anything below 50% of 1 rep max is pretty much useless for doing anything besides building capacity. And you're not going to be building capacity for any sort of resistance training application. You might be building muscular endurance if you're doing a competition to do the most press ups you could possibly do in an hour. Then doing something below 50% might be useful, but in no way would speed work at 40% be useful for you or anyone else.
Thought on top sets. Weird. We just emailed someone about this actually.
Will I read out the email?
No. We'll have a quick. Actually, no. We're going to talk about this because I'll make a video of this. So, wait. I should close the window.
Close that window, for fuck's sake.
Jesus Christ.
Okie Drummer Guy 89 says graphene oxide.
So top sets are, in our opinion, the biggest waste of time in training ever.
And our opinion is the only opinion that matters.
If you're watching this. So the main issue with top sets, right, is it's a really just, how I describe it is a really gratuitous way of training. And people love to say to us, they're like, oh, but all the best powerlifters do it at the moment. And I'm like, okay, I'm sure they do. The issue with top sets is essentially you're either doing singles, you're either going for a rep max, or you're doing volume. Both of these at the same time is just making any one of these 3 things less effective because you're wasting energy on one of these at the wrong time in the training, so you're reducing your effect. So if you go for a top set, you go for a top set of, you didn't specify singles, so you go for a top set of 5, and then you have to go back and do more sets of 5. Are your drop sets going to be more or less effective? They are definitely going to be less effective. No one would argue against that, I would say. So if you're going for a heavy single, you should already be in a position where you have periodized your training and you've gone through these sets and reps. So if you're going for a heavy single, why on earth would you ever go back and do sets of 5 after that heavy single? Because you either had a very successful heavy single or you've done something wrong. Going back and doing sets of 5 won't make any difference. So there's never a good argument for doing top sets and they're dropping down. And I know a load of people are like, the best powerlifters are doing it. And you're like, fool, when you come to us ask that question, that's just the answer we have. Loads of these powerlifters, right? We've said this before, a lot of them are on gear and they just train a lot. And I know they compete in the IPF and people are like, oh, the IPF's clean, but they get tested once a year randomly at
IPF testing, I would say, is easier to pass than CrossFit Games testing.
It sounds like it. It sounds like there's no out of competition testing or anything. So, not to pigeonhole you, holmium, if that's holmium, one of the noble gases, that's not to pigeonhole you if that's where you're coming from. But that's where we see it a lot. And then people like to come back to us with the top sets thing, you know. So there's no good argument for top sets. If we look at the most productive and most well-grounded way of training, which is block periodization, at no point do really top sets feature into that. The only time you could possibly, even though it's still a less effective way of doing training, is you're in the latter third of your training. You're moving from your kind of moderate volume, moderate sets and reps with slightly heavier weights, and you're moving into your last phase of training. And at certain parts of that week, you want to do maybe some heavier singles to practice singles again. That's a different scenario than going from top sets dropping down though. So I barely even call that the same thing, but even in that scenario, I would say that is potentially useful, and it's good to practice some singles, maybe like sport specific singles. So like you're doing some low bar singles and you're doing your working sets with high bar earlier on in the week. But very rarely outside a very niche time would work up to kind of top sets unless it's time to go for a rep max, or unless it's time to go for some singles, for example. There's never really a great time where top sets and drop sets, this kind of auto-regulation thing. It's, look, again, we're not coming at this from this is what we sell, because if top sets were the best way to go, that's what we would sell. But what we're doing all the time on YouTube is selling on our podcast. We're telling you information that we know to the best of our knowledge and the best of our experience to be the most productive thing people can do with their training. And so we're never telling you stuff with an agenda. We're never telling you stuff because we're doing a different way of programming than other people. We're telling you this because we know this to be works best, and we want people to have the best possible information that they can implement in their training. So we'll go the most seamlessly and we'll go the most productively for you. And so the better everyone gets, the better everyone trainings get, and the better it is for everyone across the industry, you know. So we don't have an agenda when we talk shit on stupid methods like that. But when you ask us, you know, that's the answer we want to give, because we've just not seen it to be effective. And so just know, sometimes when people listen to this, powerlifters in particular are very bought into particular methods. We see it in some of our bigger videos, not so much in well, because we haven't kind of, you know, done anything like the RPE scale in a long time, where people get very defensive on a particular method or nuance of programming, when it honestly doesn't really matter. What we all should be looking for is the best possible way to train. And there is literally a reason things like block periodization are so unanimous among the most successful countries in the world around their athletes. There is no reason powerlifting would be any different to any other sport. We just have some sport-specific stuff, and then we train you like an athlete, and top sets don't really feature in unless it's a very specific scenario.
Evan Lee says, I hope this is Evan Lee, my athlete, who's a super total athlete in Hawaii, a great lifter. Hip internal and external mobility is even on both my left and my right side. My right foot still tends to drift outwards in the squat and clean catch. Could it be tibial rotation? Very, very unlikely, Evan. This is more than likely due to some sort of motor pattern which could have been learned from a different thing, right? So what you'll often get is like you'll get an external rotation of the right foot for anyone who's used to kicking a ball. So I'm not sure if you played soccer or you might have been a kicker at some point, but those kind of things where you get a slightly staggered stance, you get slightly tilted hips, it's just very likely it's coming from something else previously in the past. And the way you have to get rid of that is just by drilling the correct movement, like putting 2 pieces of tape on the floor and keep moving those feet in the same direction every single time. If your foot's drifting out as you're doing squats, you might need to really be active with your feet and really be grabbing the floor, and that will help you get over it. But it's very unlikely. I only came across one athlete ever who had an actual tibial rotation, and he had to get his feet or his legs broken and rotated back in. But it's incredibly unlikely that that's what's happening.
219 sounds like quite the lactic bat. It was easily the most difficult single physical event in an acute time frame that I ever had to do in my entire life, without a shadow of a doubt. Nothing compares to how intense that was. Like, I've had longer training periods, I've longer training blocks, you know, I've done harder sessions, I've done multiple weeks where I'll do like 15 doubles in the snatch 3 to 4 times a week. You know, there's so many things I've done that would be difficult training blocks, but 200 for 19 was definitely one of the most intense things I've done in terms of train handling. Varden says Mirabai Chanu, who won silver medal at 49 kilo women, will get 5 CR rubies from government. I don't know what that means. Obviously, you know what rupees is. It's the
35 million.
What?
No way.
What's that in dollars? 63. Oh, a couple hundred thousand. In India, if you win any sports at nationals, then there's only some scope for future, but a lot of corruption. Actually,
there's corruption everywhere. How long do you guys take to prepare for the Mongol Rally? We started preparing in around November.
6 months, I suppose.
Yeah. Why did we leave? No, we left July. That's 8 or 9 months.
Fuck me. It was actually really stressful preparation.
Yeah, there's so much stuff to do. I wouldn't, like, if it was now when I was going to do it next summer, I'd have enough time. But if it was any time after Christmas and you were doing it in the summer, you're under savage pressure. Like, even just sending your passport away to get the necessary visas takes so long, and you have to send them away to different places and you have to travel to different embassies.
That's the worst bit.
Yeah, like the physical prep and like getting sponsorship and sorting out.
Really distracted.
No, but that was so funny because it was like the song "If You Have a Bad Day."
Oh yeah.
So if you're sorting out like the car, the sponsorships, your logistical preps, all that, you need 6 months for. But for the passports and visas, you really need 6 months for. You're doing a little sideways pan. Okay. Rafe.
Here we go.
Is that good now? But we're missing the H. Like.
Also, Ben, the money involved in the prep for the rally.
13 grand.
My God. But you will, so much money, like you'll need a lot of savings.
Yeah.
It's very expensive when you do it.
And good sponsorship.
And we did it fairly cheap. We camped for more than half of the nights. Even more than that, I'd say. And the hotels weren't that expensive. No, we camped more, probably two-thirds of the nights.
Yeah,
maybe.
a lot of the nights anyway we're camping.
If at all possible. So it is, try and get sponsorship. You'd be surprised how many, like we went into shops inside Cork City, like
and they'll help you out, like
camping shops, and we got loads of really good quality stuff that I still have, even though camping is horrendous. But
you really didn't like camping.
I just don't like camping.
You don't like camping.
Don't like camping.
No.
I like being in the wilderness, like.
Yeah, but you don't like sleeping.
No.
I love camping. Okay. Rafe.
To be fair, a lot of the places we camped were like pretty dodgy places. Like if we went camping in Connemara or like the Alaskan wilderness, maybe like a bit more comfortable. But some of the places we camped in now were a bit like. Remember the night
edgy.
Remember we were sleeping in the car in Russia?
Yes. Well, we didn't camp there because we couldn't camp.
For that's what I'm talking about. Lots of places were like that, where we were like, oh,
yeah,
there was people around, like,
yeah. There's people sniffing around.
Yeah, I think it was a skewed experience of camping.
Rafe says, I've been messing around with my feet stance and width during the squat. When my toes turn out, I feel comfier but weaker. When my toes turn almost straight, I feel way stronger.
Welcome to my life.
But interrot is limit. Oh, Ram.
Internal rotation, is it?
Oh, could be. And you need toes pointed very much straight forward, slightly out. What's happening when you're externally rotating is you're firstly allowing way more movement within the hip joint itself, but you're also shifting that focus from the posterior chain of being a full engagement of all three of your hamstrings to it just being a lateral hamstring. So just the outside of the hamstrings are engaged. You get almost no quad recruitment at all, and you get no stacking of your anterior hip flexors when you sit down. You get no stacking of the hamstrings on top of the calves. Toes almost straight forward. It's just perfect. That's how you should squat if you want a strong squat. If you just want to squat and feel comfortable, you can do whatever you want, really. Geez, there's so many questions.
Where am I going now? Thanks for answering the butt wink low bar question. No problem, Philip. Bez Google.
You were taking the piss, but you were going for that. Oh my God.
As a follow-up, if I start leaning less forward my setup, is it okay if the bar isn't exactly over midfoot at that point? No. The bar needs to be midfoot. There's a very narrow range of like fucking travel distance, and it's like this wide.
I'm going to draw them.
It's super tiny. And so starting out the bar outside the midfoot just is starting off in a less advantage. You want to give yourself the best possible chance in the start. So, just give yourself the best opportunity and try starting a place where it's over midfoot.
I'm just going to scoop off.
I gave that a good old shot, to be fair. I went for it, like.
No, you really did.
I gave it a raz, like.
This is where people are most of the time when they're starting leaning forward too much. That's just what it tends to look like. And you can see there the bar is over midfoot. All you do is don't put your ass back as far and stay with your knees a small bit straighter, and you'll be still over midfoot. Like, it's everything that happens in the middle here is what Jesus, drawing in the mirror is so hard. Everything that happens here is what's wrong. The bar is going to stay in basically the same place, and your feet will stay in the same place. You just straighten this out. Jesus, that is so difficult to do. You straighten this piece out. So the weight is always over midfoot. Look at you, you big specky cunt.
I got screen glare glasses, so these are just like blank lenses, but they have some kind of coating on them. But there's definitely some kind of... Are we going
to make this live on the thing?
Some kind of...
yes!
There's some kind of concave. I do like them though, but obviously I don't look like a dork like you, so I'm wearing them. Where are we gone? Okay, so Thomas Wright. A lot of squat programs start off with high rep, low intensity sets. This is probably supposed to be the easy stage, but it sure doesn't feel.
This is the hardest stage.
Tall people problems and just got to get good. This is actually the most productive stage of all programs, which a lot of people don't. This is the most vital part that most people skip when they're training across all kind of rounds and nuances. Like, this is a vital stage of the program, and it's supposed to be difficult because you're supposed to build some robustness, build some capacity, build some muscle mass, challenge your system in a way you haven't been doing, and develop some kind of super compensation stage so you can then slowly build the capacity each week and build on it bit by bit and not go out a quick band range or like go out of a certain percentage of the previous week. So you're slowly moving through things. So you start off with stuff that's difficult, but within your capacity, and it is super important, and it should be somewhat difficult, because otherwise, if you're not training like you're trying to kill yourself, you're not going to get better. Nicholas Larson says, how beginner friendly is your beginner weightlifting program? What kind of experience are you supposed to have? So we would recommend at least a few months. Not at least. Ideally, you'd have a few months of the weightlifting practice, so that'll give you the most out of the program. So if you're like 70-100 and you have like a 130 back squat or something like that, you're in a phenomenal place to do the beginner program. We've had people run it twice. Lots of people have run it twice, and people have gone from like 70 to like 90 and 120, 70, 100, 90, 120. Yeah. But we have had a few people, and the key part of these people, we've had very early beginners, but they've been very active in the Facebook live stream. So twice a week, for anyone who bought a program, we do live streams on our Facebook group twice a week. Myself and Fit sit down like this and go through people's videos and questions. And the people who've done the beginner program with no experience, like we're talking empty bar sets for a couple of weeks, have turned into great lifters. So it will work, but you've got to get active, Nicholas, if you are a very, very beginner.
Yeah, I'd like to say that you can do a snatch and you can do a clean and jerk, and we can get you going from there. Like you have to be able to do the movement. Like, we won't be telling you like, and now it goes from your hips to overhead. Like, you have to be able to do it, and you have to be able to train for 4 sessions a week with those movements. So like, if you have those two, and we cannot emphasize, we've started in replying to emails to people now, putting in capital letters at the end of the email, be sure to join the Facebook members group once you're a member, because it is the most important part of all of those programs. And it's where people really fall off the bandwagon, and don't make the progress they could make. Like, instead of putting 5 or 10 kilos onto their squats, they could be putting 20 kilos onto their squats. Okay. James Me says, my question, I deadlift 260 kilos plus, but I squat 180. Should I stop doing any posterior chain work and focus on quad accessory work? I fail squats by rounding over knee caving. Well, the first thing, James, is like, you obviously don't stop doing any posterior chain accessories. Like, you have to keep those things moving along, but you really should be focusing on your squat. Like, with a 260 plus deadlift, you should be squatting way north of 200 at least. Absolutely. So like, it's time now for you to to shift your focus fairly seriously, you're probably looking at direct quad accessory work 3 to 4 times a week, and you need to be squatting twice a week. You can leave your deadlift on the back burner just purely so the quality of the squats and the squat accessory work are better. You might deadlift once every 10 days. That would be perfect. But yeah, don't stop doing all the posterior chain work, because you've built up phenomenal strength. Like 260 plus is a very good deadlift. You don't want that to go away for you to just get a better squat. You want to have both of those at the same time.
People always ask these kind of things, and I get it, because it's hard doing your own training, and people always say things like this. They're like, I'm really good at clean and jerks. Should I stop clean and jerking to bring my snatch up? And it makes no sense. And I understand kind of the principle where you're like, oh, obviously my really good clean and jerk is taking away. Maybe I'm doing too much clean and jerks. No, it's just that you're probably better clean and jerks and you're just shitter at snatches, for example, or in this, you're better at deadlifting than you are squatting. Not deadlifting won't make your squat better. It's not the problem. You're just not as good at squatting. It's possible you would actually make it worse by inhibiting your strength, your strong aspects. By not doing that, you would actually potentially make your system weaker and potentially even get worse at squats. Adam Stevenson says, sorry, do you have something to say to that?
I was saying, Adam Stevenson says,
how and when would you recommend finding a 1 rep max as a beginner in first few months of training and learning techniques? I don't want to risk maxing, or should I? So, Adam, very easy. What you go by is you go by technical quality. So technical quality is what you should be looking at. So if it's not perfect, then that's not your max. What you set your max is by the weights that you can do with absolutely perfect technique. And you only increase your max when you can do the next weight above that. That's maybe 2.5 kilos more, maybe 5 kilos more, maybe 10 pounds if you're a barbarian more, where it's absolutely technical perfect. And unless it's technically perfect, you don't increase your max anymore. It's a very, very simple way of doing it. In Russia, they do things like childhood competitions where they give them points not based on what the children or like 8-year-old snatch. It's based on their technical quality, and that's how they give their medals out, and that's how they rank them, or they used to do, at least. Even a couple of years ago, they used to do that. So technical mastery is how you determine your max, not by weight on the bar, unless you're an absolute fucking horse.
Martin C says, thoughts on front squatting with straps? Good idea for long-term use. It helped me keep my chest open. Okay, so I just go first because I think you're going to talk on this fairly extensively.
You're going to ram it in there.
You're going to ram it in there?
No, you ram it.
Right, so Martin, when we see experienced lifters training front squats with straps, they're training front squats with straps because their front rack is so tight that they can't even hold on to a bar and have that bar touching. I would say for the vast majority of the population, and especially the vast majority of the natural population, so people who aren't doping frequently, you shouldn't really be front squatting with straps. There are a few caveats to that. If you're a rugby player or a football player and you're very, very big upper body and there's no way you're going to be able to front squat like that, and you're just front squatting for strength, then do use your straps. That's perfectly fine. If you're somebody, though, who is front squatting to get better at weightlifting and front squatting to get slightly stronger legs, and you want to be able to front rack a bar and do a power clean or do a clean and jerk, you shouldn't be front squatting with straps. It sounds like you might have a weak upper body as well as restricted mobility in the upper body. So in that case, you need to start doing the rows. You need to start doing external rotation work with your shoulders and getting strong in those positions to be able to maintain them. Obviously, everyone knows that fairly severe injury risk of front squatting with a strap. But yeah, I would say no, unless you're a juiced up gear monkey.
Interesting enough, I see Aaron Scott University, he wasn't too for this before. He was never kind of against it, but he never really talked about it too much, but I've seen him recently, he does use it, because it is quite an effective way of getting mobility. But if this is the only way you can do front squats, then it is an issue, and you shouldn't have to do it all the time. Like a little bit of warm-up, phenomenal, really useful, just kind of stretch things out a little bit. But if it is something you have to do all the time, then it is not good. I don't mind moving my finger. This is real Eastern Europe, no. Kind of like a Middle Eastern coach, like an Egyptian coach, like this.
Wagging.
Okay, I think me and Fitz are fading. It's been a good hour.
Yeah. Will we cherry pick 1 or 2 questions each?
Yeah, go for it. Julio Perez
Julio.
says, can the beginner weightlifting program seek over a press program be done at the same time, or is it too much volume? No, you could definitely run them at the same time, but it would probably be prudent to reduce some of the assistance work from the beginner program and keep the assistance work from the press program, because the assistance work in the beginner program is quite general, but the assistance work to the press program is integral to the success of the press program. And as you're a beginner, that press volume and press assistance work will still be very, very productive for you. So I would say you can do it, but what you could also do, just run the beginner program, and then when that's done in 12 weeks, just go run the press program, and you will be fucking swinging dicks.
Any plan of a seminar tour in Scandinavia? We will do seminars anywhere.
Yeah, we'll fly.
If we can link a few of them together, if there's people on this who want the seminar in their gym, just give us a shout and we'll try and make something work. There's a question: is it true Fitz is the real alpha male of the Seeker tribe? It's just two alphas in here. It's just two grade A alphas throwing it around. Fitz is the logistical coordinator and replier to emails, and the non-weightlifting side of Seeker Strength. Okay.
Where or how can we pre-order some pants? No pre-orders, unfortunately, this time. So we did that last time and it worked well, obviously, but this time we have sufficient funds to buy the stock. However, there is a very limited stock, because
pants are going to be gone within the first day.
I'd say pants. I think most of the stuff will be gone very, very soon. There is a very limited supply of the pants. I'm going to get the pants there while people are watching.
Just Hanshin O says, how would you go about addressing an injury without losing practice with the snatch and clean and jerk, but have patellar pain for some time, but don't know how I should take time off, as it would be highly detrimental to my progress? They are sick pants.
One thing we've done as well is, so you know the way in other pants, right? When you see like Kipsa pants or different kinds of
Nike
material,
pants, Under Armour pants,
the calf will start exploding because the zip is on the outside. Because obviously everyone is in team huge calves, so the zip is on the inside, right? And there's material behind the zip. Where's the camera?
So no breaking.
So this won't explode. So it's on the inside. I don't like the aesthetics of it.
Yeah.
One thing we did with these pants, these were designed from scratch, so they're not off the shelf. So we did think about them a bit.
The material is exceptionally good.
Only concern is about this wearing away after a while, but it still looks great there. So we'll see how things roll. But I'm super happy with this. It's the black and white color.
Yeah.
Fitz won't let me wear them training yet because this is the only pants we have right now, these, and we might need to take pictures. But I'll just sneak them away and wash them and come back.
You won't okay, so Hanshin, if it's patellar tendonitis, as you said, it's not going to get better as you're still training. Don't do anything that hurts it. If you were to get an MRI today and you were diagnosed with patellar tendonitis or tendinopathy or one of those, just stop using it. Start fixing it now, or you'll be playing with it for the next 2 to 3 years. And these tendon issues can go on even longer than that. I'm still at the point now where my knee will ache every so often, and that's been 5 years since it's fixed.
If I don't do my prehab for more than 2 days, my knees get immediately achy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're good, are we?
Are we good? Thanks for all the questions.
Yeah.
Again, kind of apologies, people whose questions we don't get to. It's only fair to do first come first serve. And then we like to do a quick 2 or 3 at the end. It's literally 55 minutes we get to every time I look at this clock, and it's like it's time to need to give it.
So if you just so you know, right, live streams usually Thursday or Friday. We usually post about them the day before. Set a reminder on your phone and just pop a question in super early if you really want to ask us something. Would you consider getting Victor Conte on the podcast? We love a good doping podcast. I would love to have Victor Conte on the podcast. The creator of Balco Labs.
Is he relevant anymore though?
He's like the slimiest little cheater ever. I'd love to talk to him.
What else would he know, or what else would he tell really?
Oh no, I want old school stories. I want stories about people getting 20-gallon buckets of the pure.
Yeah.
Of the clear, sorry.
I just want to say thanks for the great content. Love watching yourself, learning things.
Thanks Metalhead Derek.
Thank you so much, man.
It's nice to have more plates, more dates is watching.
All right.